A Sweet Smell of Roses by Angela Johnson and illustrated by Eric Velasquez. Oh, look, the book is autographed by the author. It says, "To Lance Weldy, joy in all that you do, Angela Johnson." My son Lance met Angela. In fact, he got a picture with her. Here it is. After a night of soft rain, there is a sweet smell of roses as my sister Minnie and I slip past Mama's door and out the house down Charlotte Street. Past the early morning milkman, over the cobbled bridge, and through the curb market to where everybody waits to march. Minnie and I are only waist high to most of them. Waist high, Minnie and me, waist high, holding hands and waiting to march. There is a sweet smell of roses as everyone waits for Dr. King to speak, and the colors, bright light from the sun on the flowers beside the road as we listen to Dr. King on the megaphone say, "We are right. We march for equality and freedom." Then we start to march. Minnie and me, we look ahead and walk faster like him, clapping in time with our feet, looking ahead just like him. There is a sweet smell of roses even as we march past the people who scream and shout and say, "You are not right. Equality can't be yours." Then we look farther down the road and keep holding hands, feeling a part of it all, walking our way toward freedom. There is a sweet smell of roses as more people start marching with us, pouring out of the side streets, clapping and singing, "Freedom, freedom!" And then someone picks me up and puts me on his shoulders. Somebody picks Minnie up too, and we are high above everybody, still marching. There is a sweet smell of roses as we all gather in the center of town, all together, all here, listening to Dr. King as the sun gets higher in the sky. He talks about peace, love, nonviolence, and change for everybody, and the sun gets higher in the sky. When it's time to go, we skip back hand in hand, Minnie and me, singing freedom songs along the streets, through the curb market, over the cobbled bridge, and past the mailman, to our house on Charlotte Street. And then there is Mama, worried face, waiting there for us. She smiles after a while, hugging us, and then takes our hands. And as we tell her about the march, the curtains float apart. And there is a sweet smell of roses all through our house. On the back of the book, there's a description of the book. It says, "There's a sweet, sweet smell in the air as two young girls sneak out of their house, down the street, and across town to where men and women are gathered ready to march for freedom and justice. Inspired by countless children and young adults who took a stand, two Coretta Scott King Honorees offer a heart-lifting glimpse of children's roles in the civil rights movement." I didn't know much about the Coretta Scott King Awards, so I looked up online and found this. The Coretta Scott King Book Awards are given annually to outstanding African American authors and illustrators of books for children and young adult that demonstrate an appreciation of African American culture and universal human values. The award commemorates the life and work of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and honors his wife, Coretta Scott King, for her courage and determination to continue the work of peace and world brotherhood. Wasn't that interesting? There was another thing I noticed as I was reading this book. The illustrations are kind of in a black and white or black and tan type of color, but if you go back and look at it, there's something red on each page. You ought to look back and see what it is.
This is Lance Weldy reading the About the Book and from the artist paratextual information about the book. When we learn about the civil rights movement that blew across the American landscape in the 1950s and 1960s, certain names always arise. Thurgood Marshall, Rosa Parks, Ralph Abernathy, Fannie Lou Hamer, Medgar Evers, Malcolm X, Robert Kennedy, and of course, Dr. Martin Luther King. These are all important names. Each belongs to a man or woman who sacrificed much, sometimes everything, in the quest for freedom and justice. But the men and women we commonly hear about are not the only ones who took action against injustice and oppression. For each of the names that we know, there are tens of thousands that we do not, and some of those overlooked names belong to children. A Sweet Smell of Roses is a tribute to them, the brave boys and girls who, like their adult counterparts, could not resist the scent of freedom carried aloft by the winds of change. Here is information from the artist. The two men who inspired my work in this book, Harvey Dinnerstein and Burton Silverman, are no strangers to the fine art community. Dinnerstein's work can be found in the collections of the Smithsonian, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and the Whitney Museum of American Art. Silverman's paintings have graced the covers of Time, Newsweek, and New York magazines, as well as the collections of the Brooklyn Museum, the Philadelphia Museum of Art, and the National Museum of American Art. But I first became aware of Harvey Dinnerstein and Bert Silverman in high school, when my illustration teacher brought in the then newly published books, Harvey Dinnerstein, Artist at Work, and Bert Silverman's Painting People. Both books recounted how these men had gone to Alabama in 1956 during the Montgomery bus boycott and documented the events in a series of drawings that were published in various magazines and newspapers. Later, in college, I was fortunate enough to study with Dinnerstein at the Art Students League and had the opportunity to visit Bert Silverman's studio on several occasions, and once even posed for him when his scheduled model failed to show up. Now that I am older and have a better understanding of the civil rights movement, I'm able to appreciate the work that these two men did. In A Sweet Smell of Roses, I wanted to capture the simple yet powerful spirit of their work as a way of paying homage to two artists who helped spread the news of an oppressed community's fight for justice and equality.
Don't forget to subscribe to my channel. And remember, the Principal Grandma says, you'll never know what comes next until you turn the page.